Did you know you can use a poop emoji to teach yourself CSS? I'm serious, a poop emoji. The reason you can do this is because of CSS illustrations and how great they are at teaching you things such as position, transform, and how to manipulate elements on a page in CSS. In this video, I'm going to go through 3 different emojis and I'm going to show you how to build all of them using only CSS. Let's get started now. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name's Kyle, and my job is to simplify the web for you so you can start building your dream project sooner. So if that sounds interesting, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my full CSS course I have linked down in the description if you want to take your CSS learning to the next level. Now, as you can see on the right hand side here, I have the finished version of the different emojis we're going to make in this video. We're going to make a very generic smiley face, a surprise face, which is just a variation of the smiley face, and then the more complex emoji is going to be this face mask emoji, which I figured was pretty much perfect for the timeline that we're living in right now. So to get started with this, all we need to do, create a new file, call it index.html. This is going to be where all of our HTML goes. Hit exclamation point tab. This is going to be our boilerplate HTML. And then inside the body, all we need to do is create essentially a div structure for the different elements in our illustration. So as you can see on the right hand side here, we have essentially 3 different emojis, and we want to wrap them in their own emoji class. So we can just say here, we have a div called emoji, and we're going to have 3 of these divs, one for each one of our emojis. This is just going to give us our spacing. It's not going to do anything else. And then inside of this emoji is where we're going to put that different hierarchy. So let's think about what our emoji is built out of. This smiley face has the round face portion. It has these actual eyeballs, the left and the right, and then it has its mouth. So we need to represent all of these different elements. The first thing we have is the actual head itself, this yellow section. And then inside the head, we're going to have our eyes and our mouth. So let's just do something for our eyes here. And then another div, which is going to be for our mouth. And then inside of this eyes div, we're going to need to have our left and our right eye. So we can just come in here, we're going to have an eye, which is going to be our left eye. And we're going to have the exact same thing, but this one is going to be our right side eye. And the reason we create our div hierarchy like this is because we're going to be positioning these elements and then building them with background colors and width and height. So having them in a hierarchy like this allows us to group all of our eyes at once. So both our left and right eye can be positioned by this main div here for eyes. Our head will position all of our different elements, and then the mouth obviously is just going to be on its own. That way, if we change the position of our head, it's going to move everything inside of it as well. So that's why this hierarchy is really important. If we just had a flat level where our eyes, for example, were outside of our head, they wouldn't actually move with our head, and that would be really difficult to work with, since if you move your head to a different place, your eyes should hopefully follow your body. So let's put that back to how we had it. And here we have our basic setup for our very first emoji. Let's create a style sheet here. We're going to call it styles.css. And then let's just make sure that we import that so we can just link in that style sheet called styles.css. Now that that's done, inside of our style sheet, just like I like to do in every single project, I just want to set up our box sizing here. So we can just say for all of our elements before and after, we're going to set our box sizing to be border box, just to make sizing our elements a little bit easier. And for our body, let's just remove our margin. So we'll set that to 0. We want to make sure we have a little bit of a background color. This is just going to be here BD repeated 3 times, just like that. And then I want to make sure our elements are in the center of our screen. So we're going to change our display to flex. We're going to justify our content in the center and align our items in the center. And then if we just come in here and say that emoji is going to have a margin, for example, of 1 rem, and it's going to have a background color of red and a width of 1 rem and a height of 1 rem. If I spell background correctly, that'll just give us something to look at. So when we inspect our page here, you can see that we have 3 different red circles if I zoom in all the way up here that represent our 3 different emojis. Just zoom that back to our normal zoom level, just like this. There we go. Now that we have everything zoomed to how we want, one thing you'll notice is that our red dots are at the top of our screen. In order to get them in the middle, let's just set a height here to be 100 view height and a width, which is also 100 view width. Now when we save, you can see those red dots are in the center. And instead of having these small sizes, let's create a size variable. We're just going to call it here emoji size. And we're going to set this to, for example, 200 pixels. And then we're just going to use that variable, which is emoji size, for our height and our width. And now if we save, we have our 3 different essentially emoji positions on our page, which look very similar to how our emojis are positioned over here. But obviously this background color we're going to get rid of and replace it with an actual emoji. Now the first thing that I want to start with is just going to be this circle-shaped head. So we can just come down here, we can select our head. Let's go over to our actual view to make sure we can see what's happening live as we change this. And the first thing I want to do is change our border radius. And I want to make this 50%. That's going to give us a circle. And I want to make sure this takes up the entirety of our emoji space. So we're going to set the height and the width here to be 100%. And if we just give this a background color, I'm just going to copy over this background color. It's a yellow emoji color I picked exactly from the emojis. If we save, you see we now have that yellow circle. And we can remove our background color on our emoji because we don't actually need that. So now we have our yellow face circle, which is looking really good. And the next thing that we want to do is make sure that nothing overlaps the edge of our face. So to do that, we can say overflow hidden. And now anything inside of this head that goes outside of it will just be completely hidden, because obviously we don't want something that's on the face to overlap the face and go beyond it, because that just doesn't really make sense. So we're going to hide everything. And also I want to set the position equal to relative, because everything inside of our head is going to be absolutely positioned inside of it. So we want to make sure it's relative to the actual head itself. Now the next thing we can move on to is the eyes. And if you remember right, this is this container that contains both our left and our right eye. So we want to just position where the eyes are going to be on the page. So we want to make it position absolute. And all we want to do here is set the top, and we want to set the left to some value. So a really easy way to do this is we can use this emoji size variable and just make it a percentage of emoji size. And a really easy way to do that is to use calc. We take our emoji size and then we multiply it by some percentage. In this case, we'll say we want it to be 25% up. So the top is going to be 25% away from the top of the head. So it should line up somewhere around here on the face, about 75% of the way up the face. For the left, we want this to be dead centered. So we'll say calc of that same exact variable, which is emoji size, and we'll multiply this by 0.5. Now if we just come in here and set a simple background color of maybe red, and we just give it a width of, we'll say 5 rem and a height of 5 rem, and we save, you can see that we get this red looking box, which this top left corner is going to be dead centered right here, and it's going to be about 75% of the way up the face. That's exactly what we want. We don't have to worry about the actual square not being centered, because this eyes element is not going to have a width or height, so the width and height is 0, so essentially it's going to be right in this top left corner. So that's exactly what we want for our eyes. And now we can move on to styling each of our individual eyes. So again, we're going to want to position these absolutely. So we can come in here and say position absolute, but instead of being relative to the head, they're now going to be relative to our eye container, which we know is right at this top left corner of this red square. So what we can do is just specify exactly how we want our eyes to be sized, and then when we need to position it, we're already positioning off of this exact square right here. So let's come in here and set our actual size. We're going to say the width is going to be, again, another calculation, which is based off that emoji size. And we're going to multiply here by, for example, 0.075. So it's about 7.5 times the face. For our height, what we're going to do is we're going to come in here, do a calculation off of that emoji size again. And this time we're just going to use 0.15. So the eyes are about twice as tall as they are wide. Next, we're going to set our background color. This is going to be black. And we're going to set a border radius of 50%, which is going to give us this really nice oval shape. And if we save, you now see we have our eyes right in the center of the face. They're both overlapping over the top of each other. So right now we just have a really weird looking cyclops emoji, which is definitely not what we want. So let's use those eye left and eye right classes that we created and actually position these elements where we want them to go. So the eye left, we're going to set a left, and we want to again use a calculation off of that emoji size. And here we're going to multiply by a negative value because we want to move it to the left. So if we set our left to a negative value, it'll move to the left. So we'll say negative 0.2 of the actual face. So 20% of the face over. And for the eye on the right, we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to move the right-hand side the same value over. Now if we save, you can see our left eye is over here, and our right eye is over here, and we essentially have the eye portion of our emoji done. And something that we can actually do to follow this up is if we go into our index.html here, we can actually copy this code into our other two emojis because they're going to be very similar. This one is not going to have a mouth, it's going to have the face mask, and this one down here is going to have a different mouth. We'll call it open mouth. So now if we save, you can see we have our three different emojis lined up because they're all going to share this exact same base level. If we look over here, you can see they all have the same eyes and the same face. It's just the mouth portion that's different. So let's work on first our smile. We'll actually change this to smile to be more clear in the code. We'll come down here, select that dot smile, and we want to make this smile looking shape here. So in order to do this, again, we're going to use position absolute, and this again is going to be relative to the head as a whole. Let's just go back over to this example here. And the next thing we want to do, we'll set our background color here because we know that this is going to be that black color that's the same as our eyes. And now from here, we have some really interesting things that we need to do. First, we need to make this weird looking circle shape where it has a circle on the bottom. It's very slight rounded corners around the edge here, and then completely flat on the top. This is actually a fairly complex shape to make, but we can do it pretty easily with border radius. So first, let's set up the width and height of our mouse. So here we can come in and say that the width is going to be, again, a calculation based on our emoji size. So we'll say emoji size, and we're going to make this width about 60% of our face. And then for our height, we're going to do something very similar, calculation, which is going to be a variable based on emoji size. And here we're just going to use 0.3. And now if I save this and look over here, you can see we just have this black box. Right now we're not actually positioning it anywhere. So let's make sure we position it from the bottom, based again off of that emoji size. And we're going to say that we want this to be bottom positioned about 15% from the bottom. And then again, we're going to do our left. This is going to be a calculation, which is going to be dead center. So we'll say emoji size times 0.5. And if we save, you can see our mouth is positioned vertically where we want it to, right here, but horizontally, it's way off on the right-hand side. And that's because we need to translate this backwards 50% of its own width. Because what this left does is it sets the left-hand side of our square. And what we want to do is set the actual center. So we can use a really cool trick where we do transform translate in the X direction, and we just translate negative 50%. And what this does is it takes 50% of the width of our mouth and moves us backwards that amount. So combination with left 50% and transform negative 50%, we get the exact same thing, essentially, where we're going to have a dead centered object. If I save, you can see our mouth is now dead center. And right now this emoji is looking pretty scary with this weird big square shaped mouth. So let's add in that border radius effect. Now in order to make our border radius exactly like we want, let's break out this mouth height here into its own variable. So we say mouth height is going to be equal to this height right here, just like that. Whoops. And then we can set that down here. So we could say mouth height, just like that. And now we get to our border radius. So let's look over here. We can see the top left corner and the top right corner both have a very slight border radius. So the top left is going to be 5% and the top right is going to be 5%. Now we have this half circle down here for our bottom left and our bottom right. And in order to get that perfect half circle look, we can set them both equal to our mouth height. So we can just say variable mouth height and variable, which is mouth height. And now what happens if we save and we go over here, whoops, if I put the semicolon in the right spot and save, you can see we get that exact same mouth shape. We have the nice little 5% rounding up here, and then the full half circle down here because it's the exact same size as the height of the element itself. So now next, let's try to make this really surprised looking face because we finished the smile. Now we can move on to the surprised face. And one thing you're going to notice is the surprised mouth and the smiley mouth are in the exact same position. They actually share a lot of the same code from over here. So let's abstract that out into its own mouth-shaped class. So we can get out here our position, our bottom, left, and our transform. Those are going to be exactly the same between all of our different mouths. Even our background color is going to be the same. So let's move those into there, just like that. And now let's add a mouth class to both our smile and down here to our open mouth, just like that. If we look over here, our code is exactly the same. But now what we can do is we can select our open mouth. And all we need to do in here is just set our width and our height and our border radius, and it's going to give us our exact mouth that we want. So let's come in here with a width. Again, going to be based off of that variable, variable emoji size. And what we're going to do here is we're going to multiply, for example, 0.25. And we're going to do height, which is going to be very similar. Again, emoji size. And this one we just want to be slightly taller, so we're going to use 0.3 here, for example. And then a border radius of 50% is going to give us this nice perfect oval shape. If I save and I jump over here, you can see we now have that nice oval shaped surprise face and the smiley face, and they're both sharing a lot of the same code, so we don't have to duplicate that between them, which is really handy. Now the last emoji we have left is going to be this face mask emoji, and this one, like I said, is the most complex. So let's come over here. Right now we have our face mask emoji in the middle. Let's add in a face mask class. This is going to be for containing this square here for our face mask. And then we need to add in our 4 different straps. So we can just say we're going to have a strap, and then we're going to have a strap top left. We're going to copy this down because we're going to have a top right. We're going to have a bottom left, and we're going to have a bottom right. This is going to be our 4 different corners for the straps that go off the edges of our face, so that we have all these different straps, and they're all inside the face mask, so they're positioned based on the face mask position, which is really, really important. So let's save that, go back into our style sheet, and select our face mask. We can also select our strap while we're at it, but let's first style the face mask itself. One thing that we can also do with this face mask is it actually is very similar to our mouth. They are actually in the exact same position, so we can use this mouth class again here in order to make sure that we have this positioned correctly. And all we need to do in here, for example, is set a width, which in our case is going to be the exact same size as our smiley mouth. So we're just going to say variable of emoji size times 0.6. And we're going to set our height here, which again is a calculation based off of that emoji size. And we're just going to come in here, multiply this by 0.35. And we're going to come in here with a border radius, and this is just going to be 10%. So now if we save, come over here, we now have a black section in the middle, which is just looks like a really scary screaming mouth. In order to make it look like a face mask, we can just change our background color to be white, and that already looks better. And we're going to give this a little bit of a border. Again, we're going to scale this based on that emoji size. This one's going to be pretty small though. We'll just use 2% of that size. It's going to be solid, and it's going to be this grayish color, 999. And that gives us this nice little outline around our mask to just kind of emphasize it's a mask and maybe not someone with really scarily white teeth, because that would be really scary. So now with that mask done, let's move on to the individual straps. We're going to want to position them absolutely, obviously, so we can position them properly. We're also going to want to come in here, set the background color to be white. We're going to want to have essentially the exact same border. So I'm just going to copy this border down. It's going to be exactly the same. We're going to have a width, which is going to be based again off of that emoji size. This one's going to be 50% of the width. That way it can make sure it spans this entire width. And our height is going to be very similar, but it's just going to be 10%. And if we save, you can see our straps are kind of showing up right here. If I give them, for example, a top of negative 10 pixels, should just be a little easier to see them. We'll even go a little further, we'll do negative 30. And there you can see our strap up here right underneath the eyes. That's what we have right now. And what we need to do is position each one of these with a top, left, right, rotate and everything to put one here, one down here, here, and here. So we have the 4 different corners. So we'll do the strap on the top left first. And for this one, we're going to just do a little bit of a rotation. So we'll say rotate, maybe we'll say 20 degrees. If we save, you see we get that nice little rotation, which looks really good. We're also going to set our top here to a calculation, which is based on that emoji size. And this one's going to be negative, and it's going to be 0.05, just like that. And you can see it's essentially positioned itself slightly upward. If we were to have this be 0, that'd be the same as top 0. You can see it's down a little bit. With this 0.05, it just positions itself upward slightly, which is exactly what we want. Now we also need to position on the left-hand side. So we can say a variable here, which is our emoji size. We're going to do -0.4 in this case. And if we save, you can now see that strap has positioned itself where we want it to, but there's a problem in that it's in front of our face mask, and obviously we want this to be behind our face mask. So to change that, let's make all of our straps have a z index, which is going to be -2. And if we save, you're going to actually notice that these don't go behind our face mask or the face or anything for that matter. And the reason why that is because our face mask actually has a stacking context being created for it, which is a bit of a confusing concept, but essentially what that means is that everything inside of our face mask, so our straps, can never go behind our face mask itself. So in order to fix this, we need to remove the stacking context from our face mask. And the reason it has the stacking context is because it has a combination of transform and position being set on it. So in order to fix this, let's just copy our left and transform here down into our face mask. And what we want to do is remove our transform. So let's just set this to none. And if we save, you're going to notice our straps are properly being hidden through that -2z index, but our face mask now is not in the right position. So another way to make this centered is just to make this left property here, subtract half of the width from it. So we can say 0.5 minus 0.3, which is going to be 0.2. And that's going to give us a dead centered face mask just like this. Now to make our straps appear in front of our face, we just scroll all the way up to our head here and give this a z-index of -1. Now since our straps have a z-index of -2, they're going to appear behind our head, and our head with a z-index of -1 is going to appear in front of them, so that is exactly what we want. And now you can see that our strap is properly in front of our face and behind our face mask. So now we can move on to all of our other straps. For example, our top right strap, which is going to be very similar to this strap. All we need to do here is change this from left to right. And if we save, you're going to see we get our strap in the correct position. We just need to reverse our rotation. And now if we save, you can see we essentially mirrored the strap on the left with the strap on the right. Now let's move on to our other straps, which are going to be our bottom left and our bottom right. So we have first our bottom left. We're going to need to have a different rotation here. We're going to do a rotation of 30 degrees because it's going to be a little bit of a starker change. And instead of specifying our top, we want to specify our bottom, which in our case is going to be nearly the same. We'll just change this to 0.06 instead of 0.05. Now if we save, you're going to notice that's not quite right because this is right. We need this to be left. And we also need to make sure up in our strap section here, we remove this top. This shouldn't be here. That was just for demonstration purposes. And now if we just change this rotation to be the exact opposite, you can see we have our strap going off of the edge of our face. Let's do the exact same thing, but with bottom and on the right. All we need to do, reverse our rotation, change left to right, and we should have the exact mirrored strap on the bottom right-hand side. And now one thing I want to mention is that you noticed we used this variable emoji size absolutely everywhere in our code. We didn't hard code a single number. So the reason for that is because if I go up here and now change our emoji to be 100 pixels and save, everything on our page is going to scale based off of that emoji size. So you can imagine you could put in a slider in JavaScript and increase and decrease that slider and change the size of the emojis all over your page. If we made this really big, for example 300, you can see our emojis are bigger. We jump it all the way down to 50 and they're way smaller. You can really play around with this value. And since everything is based off that value, it's going to scale perfectly and it's not going to look any different, which is really cool and something most people ignore when it comes to CSS in general. And that's all it takes to create these CSS illustrations. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my other CSS related videos linked over here and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.